This is the lesson overview for Year 1, Lesson 2.4, which is all around identity and what that concept means. I'm going to start just by reviewing some of the information here quickly at the top. So the goal of this unit, so that's Year 1, Unit 2, is that students will be able to practice self-reflection and develop a purpose-driven mission. For this particular lesson, students are going to be able to define identity and also be able to describe the different dimensions of their own identities. There are some assessment recommendations here about how you might assess student understanding based on the activities that they're going to do. You have your alignment with the CASEL social emotional learning framework around self-awareness and obviously identity, and then portfolio documentation for what students are going to generate. You also have some resources here that you might want to pull in or look at ahead of time. For example, some of these basics of identity refresher, how to explore the concept of identity. There's an overview of the Freyer model that's a part of this, so you probably want to have a quick peek at these resources before you dive in. Notably, there are no prerequisites to this lesson, so I will jump through the lesson step by step. So there's an optional refresher if you've been doing these lessons in order with your students. You'll see that there's a quick discussion, if you so choose, about the last lesson around how students spend their time. And then really this lesson opens with students being able to sit down and think about what they consider their identity. So writing down some characteristics or aspects of their identity, and also making sure to save that reflection. But then as a whole class, you'll explore how identity might be defined and some different aspects of it. So there's no one definition of identity that we use on the project. There's all of these different aspects or definitions that are possible. So social identity, including some of these things like ability, age, social class, race. Personal identity might be another way that people think about identity, family, interests, neighborhood. There's a bunch of different identity markers here. You can feel free as you're doing this to pull in your own definitions of identity or your own identity markers or identity categories that you might want to have students talk about. And also, as you're doing this, you might want to adapt these lists to what feels most appropriate to your learners and your age. For example, in some societies, maybe certain aspects of identity are more suitable to be talking about in school with different age groups versus others. So you can adapt how you want to describe and define identity here based on what feels most appropriate to you. You'll then go into this Freyer model. So once you've had a chance to sit and think about all the different ways you might define identity or all the different possible elements that might make up identity, the Freyer model asks you to define the word identity as a class using this little model here. So you can see the idea of definition of the word, the characteristics, some examples or some non-examples. This would be a component of the lesson if you are short on time that probably I would recommend skipping if I were the teacher. But this is a way to help students kind of clarify a little more deeply what identity means. It is a really helpful visual organizer, especially to bring in that kind of dimension. But again, if you are short on time, perhaps skip over that, because really what we want to get to is step 4 here, where students have the ability to create their own identity maps. You're going to give them a good chunk of time to look at all of the different aspects of identity in this list and others, maybe a list that you've created, again, based on what feels most appropriate to your students. As we say here, adapt to your age level and local context. So it gives students a chance to really be putting together a list of all of their different identities and then hopefully creating what we call an identity pie. So giving them the chance to think about their different identities and all of the different components of how they define their identity as slices of a pie. So larger slices of the pie representing more dominant aspects, maybe less dominant aspects representing smaller slices. There are different ways to do this, so you can definitely get creative if you want to use something even more visual, like a collaging exercise, a timeline. We've had a teacher, Tumina, who did some of these things with her students as an example here embedded in the lesson, and then give students a little time to turn and talk with one another. If you don't have time for a turn and talk, you could do this as a full group, or just have students chat as they're actually completing the exercise. And then finally, there's an exit ticket here where you can have students do a concluding exercise, just writing down how they would define identity, and hopefully that demonstrating a little bit of a deeper understanding compared to how they entered the lesson. So that is lesson 2.4.